Hey guys, how's it going? It's Danconia here. Welcome back to Overwatch. So, I didn't make a video on the dev update from yesterday because I was waiting for everything to go live, because this is the dawn of the experimental card, where we get to try out things that the devs have been trying in the back room, in the testing, and the first test is the 1-3-2 or the 3-2-1 or whatever combination of it you want to do, triple damage comp that Jeff told us that they were experimenting with at the end of last year. This means 3 DPS, 1 tank, and 2 supports. So, it's going to be interesting because with this update, and this is only on the experimental card, before anyone goes, oh my god, what are they doing to the game? It's on the experimental card. It's not on competitive, it's not on quick play, it's not even in the arcade. It's just on the experimental card. This is for us to try to see if it's basically a fix for DPS queue times. And that kind of tilts me a little bit, but hey, this is what we're with here. But this change to the rule set would have major implications because it removes the off-tank role, right? So your traditional D.Va, Roadhog, and Zarya would have to be changed to become main tank. Basically, they'd have to become main tanks, and it would be very interesting. So with this experimental card has come a massive load of buffs and nerfs to the tanks to balance them for a 3-2-1. And this again is only in the experimental mode, so don't go mad. So D.Va has had her armor pool increased from 200 to 400, what it used to be, and base health reduced from 400 to 200. That's how D.Va used to be, her armor health ratio. Her defense matrix has been increased from 2 seconds to 4 seconds, and believe me, you'll be seeing in the footage in the background, that actually makes a massive difference. It makes D.Va feel much more like a main tank. It feels like you can move forward with the defense matrix up, much like you would a Sigma or a Reinhardt, someone like that. So, actually, I think with all these changes, D.Va has adapted very well to being a main tank, and that surprises me a massive amount. Her fusion cannons as well, the movement penalty has been reduced from 50% to 30%. Obviously, she can't be moving like a tortoise if she wants to move forward. So, we've also had a change to Orisa. This is kind of a revert here, so they've reverted her protective barrier cooldown to 8 seconds from 10 seconds, and her barrier health increased to 900. This is what Orisa used to be like before double barrier. And that makes sense because you cannot have double barrier when you can only have one tank. So you would revert Orisa so that she could become that tanky main tank that she used to be. Again, only in experimental mode, don't get carried away. Reinhardt, generally his armor to health ratio has been adjusted. His armor health has been increased from 200 to 300, and base health decreased from 300 to 200, making him more tanky. His rocket hammer damage has been increased from 75 to 90, and then his barrier field regeneration rate has been increased from 200 to 250. Now, this is a thing you will see generally. The abilities that absorb damage for these tanks, right? So either that be your barrier, your defense matrix, your take a breather, things like that. They will be buffed, and pretty heavily buffed, whether that means their cooldown has been reduced, whether that means their regeneration rate has been increased, or whether that means their overall health has been increased. Because with a single tank in the game, you don't have another tank to soak up that damage. So you are brutally, literally soaking up all that damage, and you've got to have the tools in your back pocket to be able to do that. That's what these buffs mean. So, the next really interesting one is Roadhog. So take a breather. Now leaves behind a cloud when used. This cloud heals all allies within it for 25 health per second and provides 25% damage reduction. So basically, it's a whole hog, not a whole hog, take a breather, but it's for your whole team now in a circular pattern like Soldier 76's healing field is. It's an interesting one. I wasn't enamored with Roadhog because, again, with no way to negate incoming damage, yes, it's a damage reduction, but like D.Va, Orisa, Reinhardt, Sigma, Winston, Zarya, you have everything to stop things coming in like Ana grenades. sleeps, things like that. Hog doesn't have this. He has nothing to stop this. And I think he suffers for it majorly. Because all it's going to do, if Roadhog was to become meta in a single main tank world, then Anna would be she would be an insta-pick. She would be meta more than Hog would be. And she'd probably force Hog out of the meta, to be quite honest with you. She'd just drop a nade. Every time Hog uses his take a breather, when Anna's got her nade up, she will use her nade. And it will negate all of the health gain that you're getting from that take a breather across the whole team that's using it. So, yeah, Anna really slaps Hog in this experimental mode, big time. But Sigma, he's kind of had a revert as well. Regeneration rate for his experimental barrier has been increased from 120 to 200 per second, and then barrier health has been increased from 900 to 1200. Again, this is because he needs to be a main tank, not an off tank. Winston, his general armor health pull increased from 100 to 200. His total health is now 600. Again, he needs to be more tanky. And the barrier projector, his cooldown has been reduced from 13 seconds to 10 seconds. Because, again, he needs to use it more often because he's the only tank on the field. He hasn't got D.Va alongside him to soak up damage. Then we have Zarya. Zarya is a really interesting one as well. So, general. Shield's health pull increased from 200 to 300. So the total health is now 500. Maximum energy gain per barrier has been decreased from 40 to 30 because she has more barrier basically now. So she can't gain the same amount of damage or she'll be OP. Particle cannon primary fire. Maximum primary fire damage per second reduced from 170 to 140. Again, same point as I made just now. Because she's got more shield health pull, because she's got more of her bubble, she needs to basically have a nerf to her damage gain and damage output, because otherwise she'd just gain way too much damage and she'd be outputting way too much damage. And then a secondary fire, her maximum secondary fire damage reduced from 95 to 80. Her particle barrier for herself, her cooldown has been decreased from 10 seconds to 8 seconds. This is because she'll need to use it more often for herself, obviously. And then her particle barrier for her ally now creates a barrier on all allies within 8 meters of your target, and has its duration increased from 2 seconds to 3 seconds. So, when you bubble an ally, it won't just bubble that person, it will put barriers on everyone within 8 meters of that teammate, which is obviously could be really cool for pushes. If you can get a really organized push, that could actually be really cool. So, it's an absolute mega ton of changes on the experimental mode, and it really changes the way you kind of play, obviously. What do I think? My very, very, very early impressions. And again, with this sort of thing, you have to give it time, but right now, if you go and play the experimental mode, you will see that there is a very long tank queue time and short queue times for everything else. That is a flash in the pan for the update, obviously. Everyone wants to try what these completely different tanks are like. What do I think this will do in the long term? Actually, I don't think it will do that much. Again, I say long term, that's if it was to go live, and it's not gonna go live. Not yet. If the experiment is a success, then I would imagine Blizzard may say, well, we're going to do an experimental competitive season with this rule set. Again, that's way down the line. This is like beta testing here. So it's not going to affect anything else right now. But with this comes a lot of problems. The problems with tanks right now, and why it is so goddamn easy to get into the tank queue and get straight into a game, is because people don't want to play tanks because tanks aren't fun. Why aren't tanks fun? Because there is an abundance of CC in the game. If you haven't noticed, there's a certain demon called Mei in the meta right now, and it just makes things very unfun. And I can say this from a first-hand point of view. I've played Reinhardt for the past God knows how many seasons. I don't want to play Reinhardt this season, because I am sick of going up against Meis. So I'm going back to my off-tank, I'm going back to my D.Va, and things like that. And it's a major issue. And also there's a major issue with DPS players. Obviously, they've got the really long queue time currently on competitive, and then they're kind of going in and playing off tanks and playing him in a DPS sort of way, and it's not working. So I think you still have the same issue if this was to go live. Because once all the hype dies down, you get back to a thing where you've got certain issues. You've got the CC still being in the game, so you've still got the issue of the tank just not having a good time playing tank. So the tank plays a few games, he gets fed up, he moves on and goes and plays either another game, or he goes and plays another role. He goes and plays support, or he goes and plays DPS. So you're still adding to that queue time. Yes, it will inevitably reduce the DPS queue because there are going to be more slots to be able to be filled. I think it would increase the support queue as well, but I don't think it overall solves the issue. I think it puts too much pressure on the main tank. I still think there would have to be major changes, especially to Hog. I still don't think this Hog would work in a main tank role. There is the issue of the off tanks that are currently playing the game. So if you're currently, and I don't want to use the word one trick, but if you're say an off tank main, right? So you play the Hog, the Zarya, the D.Va, and that requires a certain playstyle. A style that is generally unique to the off tank, right? You don't play necessarily like a main tank does. Because if you're playing D.Va, you can go for more cheeky flanks, and you can go for more, not solo kills, but you can be a bit more independent. If you're Zarya, and I think this adjusts the Zarya especially well, Zarya has always been one to stick with her main tank normally. So I think Zarya is generally okay. But a Roadhog, again, Roadhog, knowing he can go on for very cheeky flanks, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. Roadhog is not always known generally for playing with his main tank, unless you're playing him with an Orisa. In that case, you're just looking for Holt hooks, and that's kind of the only thing you play him with together with. So, if those off tanks still want to play those tanks, they have to play him in the main tank style when they get changed. If they were to get changed, if this was to go live, and I think that presents a problem, because you'd have a wealth of players that are not used to playing main tank. They go and play these new main tanks that were off tanks in the off tank sort of way you'd play these tanks, and it creates massive problems in games. Like the problems we've got now with DPS players going and queuing tank because of the short queue times, insta-locking off tank, and playing them like DPS. And flanking, and doing silly things, and not playing like a team. You can get away with that when you play things like a Tracer. Not when you play things like Zarya. No, please don't do that. Because, as all of these changes have outlined, the off-tank supports the main tank. Generally, the off-tank supports the main tank. And without that off-tank, you have to make significant changes to the main tank to allow them to be, well, to allow them to exist, basically. If you were just to go to 3-2-1 with the current main tank as they are on the normal servers, not the experimental mode, then it would kill the game. Honestly, it would kill the game, because main tank would not be playable, really. It would just be ridiculous. So you would just basically be a piece of bait on a hook. And all in all, I don't think this works. Very early indications, obviously. And there's obviously the elephant in the room of competitive play, because pro play, because this would go to the Overwatch League contenders and everything else if this was to go live, because continuity and all things. And what happens to your supremely good off tanks? Your players like Hanbin, like Choi Hyobin, like Meko. I can still say Meko is a good tank. People like that, Hotbar, and even, not even just at that level, I'm thinking of Smex as well, and contenders, really good off tanks. There are a lot of, Hafikal comes to mind. Where do these players go from there? Do they adapt to the new main tanks and then oversaturate the pro player main tank pool? Or do they just retire? It presents a lot of issues in a lot of ways. and I don't think this is what fixes the DPS queue issue. I think what needs to happen is main tank needs to become tank needs to become a lot more exciting and a lot less frustrating to play. And I don't think that is necessarily in the hands of the tanks. I think that is in the hands of the buffs and nerfs that need to happen to other heroes to make it much more fun. Because I think if we were to turn back the clock, say we were in a dive meta, right? And go back to the days when Reaper was a dead hero, Mei was a dead hero. They were completely, not viable in most cases. I think you would see a much better population of tanks, because it would be much more fun to play, regardless of what tank you were playing, unless you were playing Orisa. So that's my first thoughts on this experimental mode on 3.2.1. Now I've had a chance to play it. Again, I'd love to know what you guys think, because this is what this is about. This is working out what this is and working out whether this works. In my opinion, it doesn't work. But I'd love to know whether you guys think it works. So, I hand it over to you, and I look forward to what you will say in the comments. But for now, thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you liked it, give it a like, subscribe if you're new, and I will see you in the next video. See you then.